Welcome to A Word With Yourself. Today we're going to talk about cognitive biases, aka all the ways that your brain makes you mess up. I was going to say something different, but I always forget what the rules are around swearing.
I think you can swear on podcasts. Actually, can you on YouTube? I don't know.
Actually, I have no idea.
We
So all
won't
the
risk
ways
it.
your brain will trick you to make you make illogical and bad decisions.
Yeah.
Because we love that for us, being really unevolved.
Yeah, it's all our caveman instincts, but then put into the corporate workplace, which is
Yes.
great.
Yeah.
And there's a name for nearly everything that annoys you in the workplace, probably about decisions, and it's like psychological name or theory about it. And that's what we've been looking into recently with our logical fallacies series. Is that what we called it?
Yeah. We have an article series. Check it out. You can go to our website. It's there. It's probably also all over LinkedIn, where we go through loads of them. We're not going to talk all over, paste it everywhere.
Be sick of
we're not going to talk about all of them today because there is not enough time. But we might talk about more in later.
About a few of them.
Yeah.
I'll just finish off my little bit of coffee there now. I didn't have a Diet Coke ready, damn it. But look,
damn it,
it's fine. I'll have it afterwards. I've already had 3 espressos, so should be okay. Anyway, just love the little tiny cups, and it's just so delicious. Anyway, so the first one was confirmation bias, I think.
Yeah, confirmation bias.
What, from a theoretical standpoint, is that? And then what kind of examples are there that we could relate to?
So confirmation bias is essentially where you will give more weight or actively seek out information that supports what you want to believe to be true or you already believe to be true, whilst kind of ignoring or giving less weight to contradictory evidence. Right? So, for example, if you are like, oh, I think that Leslie is underperforming, then you will pay more attention to like maybe mistakes that someone might make and not pay enough attention to where they're doing really well. Right? So it's about like really just trying to, not trying to, you're doing this unwittingly in a lot of sense. That's why it's hard to tackle, where you're really just paying more attention to the stuff that supports your opinion, and not giving enough time to the stuff that might contradict it. And so that can be difficult, especially if you're in the position of like either managing people, right? But also if you're creating strategies, because you might be like, hey, I have a great new strategy that I think will be great. Let's look into the strategy. And so people go in and they do some research and whatever, and you only really pay attention to the stuff that tells you that that strategy is actually good, because that will, make you feel better. And then you don't pay enough attention to potentially the stuff that says, actually, you know what, maybe that strategy isn't the best one right now. Maybe we should be doing something else. And so confirmation bias can wreak havoc in a workplace, really. And so when like there's an element where some people say, oh, I really like leaders to be like humble. Sounds like super cringy, but there is an element of like truth to that, because as a person, the way to tackle confirmation bias is to kind of be less arrogant in your opinions. And I don't necessarily mean arrogant in the like swagger way, but like as in like you have to be open to the fact that you're wrong and actually seek out information that might contradict what you believe to be true. And so there's like a humbleness kind of and a curiosity in that to try and like counteract confirmation bias.
Yeah. People don't like to hear that something they presented is wrong, so they'll probably get very get their back up about it as well. So there's that pride thing too, so that always comes into it as well.
So that's kind of a big one. And I think it's one of those things, like when you learn about some of these biases, you kind of sometimes retroactively go back and you're like, oh, that's what was going on there.
You just think, oh, it's just a toxic work environment, or it's just poorly managed or something. But there is actually, research behind what the process is in your mind or anybody else's mind for like making these decisions, and kind of your reactions to things as well.
That's why I think like there's always room to try and give people grace, right? Because there's sometimes of course it is people who are just like intentionally just out to screw people over or behaving badly, but sometimes they're just like not
thinking about it,
right? Like, I don't want to say like they're not good at their job, because I think that's too reductive, but like they're a victim of some of these fallacies and biases that then makes them not very good at their job, but it's not intentional. Now there's the argument that like impact is as important, if not more important, than the intent, and sure, like if you're not good at your job, you're not good at your job, regardless of whether it's unintentionally because you're like victim of some of these biases or not. But there's grace in the first kind of few times, especially if you're managing these people, right? Like to be like, hey, like, are you aware that potentially this might be a thing?
That goes back to self-awareness and, you know, trying to increase your self-awareness, because you might think you're really self-aware, but you're not. Like I am always trying to think of like, oh my God, am I self-aware or am I thinking I am? And other people are thinking, God, she just talks nonsense like all the time. And like, yeah. So the level of self-awareness is a factor too, I think.
I was joking with a friend of mine recently about dating profiles. And someone had put on their dating profiles, you know, that they were very like curious about people and like blah blah blah. And I was like, wouldn't it be so funny if you listed on your profile that like you were, you know, really empathetic, like it was so curious about people, always ask questions, like blah 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 blah. And then you're like, but one bad thing about me is that I have no self-awareness.
And it's either a really funny joke or they don't even get it.
Yeah, right, exactly. So you list all these amazing things about yourself, like, but also I have no self-awareness, and I just it's always so funny.
Even realizing you have no self-awareness is being self-aware in a way.
Honestly, that's still a great step forward.
Yeah. On the topic of dating profiles, I think there should be like some kind of agency that helps people put together their profiles, because the general consensus among women in Toronto about profiles is that they're so cringy, or that they're just not marketing themselves well enough or something, or just putting things down that don't interest women or whatever. I feel like every man has a picture of himself holding a fish. Everyone. And a lot of topless mirror selfies in the gym. And I think I could make a lot of money curating profiles for men on their social media or on their dating apps.
I think it's a business opportunity. And also, actually, thinking about this might be an example of confirmation bias, because if they're creating profiles that they think is attractive because they think this is what I like in men as friends, right? It doesn't have to be romantically, but they're like, do you know what? I think I'd find a guy cool if he was at the gym or blah 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 blah, or he went someone to go fishing with. Like, and then they make that profile, and it's like, okay, but you're ignoring the fact that women everywhere are saying, please stop putting these photos.
Please stop.
Right? Yeah.
The amount of things I've seen on Instagram being like, oh, classic man holding a fish photo. Like, I don't know how they haven't seen it, or how a female friend of theirs hasn't seen it on the app or something and like recommended to them that they don't do that. The same way that like women dress for women, like a lot of the times as well. Like, like men would be like, that makeup is far too much, but like they feel more confident, and other women would be like, wow, I love your makeup. So it's another psychological thing too. Everything is about psychology.
I mean, like, it is.
Honestly, it is. And how people's brains work. And back to the confirmation bias thing, it can create toxic work environments when, say, a manager doesn't like one person, and even though that person is doing exactly the same thing as somebody else at the same level of them, they're being treated differently, and it causes this like animosity, or like, why am I being treated this way, and so on and so on. But it's like, again, one of those things that's not visible, like there's not hugely tangible evidence for it, but it just creates this environment where people feel uncomfortable, or, you know, that they're not valued and things like that too. So it definitely is so prevalent, and it's very hard to address, for sure.
Yeah, it is. Because for better or for worse, some people who are more, I was going to say secure in, but it's the wrong word, who are more confident in their opinion, let's say, stubborn in their opinion, are the people who are more susceptible to confirmation bias, but also the people who are least likely to be able to take a look at themselves, to have a word with themselves, and examine that, right, to see if they're, you know, so it's a tricky one. I'm sure people will see plenty of examples of that, or have seen plenty of that one.
Oh yeah,
that's a fun one.
Definitely. People are just more drawn to things that they're familiar and comfortable with, and that really kind of back up their opinions on things. So it's just human nature, I guess, as we started off saying.
It all is.
It's even like meeting Irish people abroad. We're automatically more comfortable talking to them about the most private things, or like the most deep things, or provocative things, because we know we relate to them well and they'll get us, you know?
And in Ireland, we wouldn't talk to them.
No. If you meet someone on the street, your best friends, oh my God, you tell them your life story and all of your family drama, but you only just met them. But if you met that same person in Dublin or something, you just ignore each other, which is great.
Yeah, good time.
Yeah.
Okay. Another
Next
one I think is great is a bandwagon effect, aka what happens when you give into FOMO. That's fundamentally what it is. Because it turns out that yes, if all your friends jumped off a cliff, you probably would jump off with them. That is the answer.
Because they'd all be dead, and what are you going to do?
Well,
no
you'll
point
think they have
living.
a good reason for it, and maybe you should jump off the cliff too, or you might miss out on whatever information they have, or you don't want to look stupid because you don't seem to know the reason they're all jumping off the cliff. So you'll jump off the cliff and pretend you knew all along why everybody's jumping off the cliff. So it's a tricky one, and I have been victim to this a lot at work, especially in stuff where there's like a power imbalance. But it's basically if everybody else is doing it, you think that you are missing something, and then you do it as well just because everybody else is. And I mean, some of it can be peer pressure, but some of it is not active pressure, right? Some of it is just, everybody seems to think that answer A is correct, but I'm like 100% sure answer B is correct. But now I'm not sure anymore because everybody else is so convinced that answer A is correct. I'll just say answer A too, right? Lest you look kind of like stupid or uninformed and that you're missing something. So that's what the bandwagon effect is.
Yeah, I definitely fall victim to that just because I don't want to look stupid, and which is a terrible thing, but that's just, I guess, the way it is, and exactly why we're talking about it. When other people are so sure of things, I'm always kind of hesitant to voice my opinion or something because I'm like, they must know something I don't, or I haven't educated myself enough on the topic or something that I will probably be wrong. You always revert back to, negative aspects of yourself, which is terrible.
Yeah.
It's like a therapy session.
Yeah. Because it becomes more chronic in situations where you have a mix of influence in a group, right? And so where it happened, I'll give you one example of where it very specifically happened for me. I had just joined an executive team, and there were, like up to that point, I was an executive, but like not in the like core, we are the people making this, doing the strategy and making the company decisions. I was like a level down, like VP. So now I was in the, in the core group. Very exciting time. But there were other people within that group that carried more influence and more favor or had been there longer. And I needed a role that I needed to hire for. And that role, I needed some functions fulfilled. And the two functions I needed fulfilled, one was technical and one was more managerial and like project management. And I was making the case for the fact that I don't believe that we could get one person to do both of these things really well. And we needed both things done really well. We didn't really have room for one to be weaker than the other, without spending a huge amount of money and a really long recruitment cycle to try and find this very special person who could do both of this. That I don't believe that exists. I think this needs to be two roles. I think we need to have like the manager, kind of project manager person, and then we need to have the very technical, like expert person, and maybe they can work together or whatever that looks like. But we need two people to do this. And the person with more influence and favor, who did not have any of the same experience that I did. To be clear, he was over a completely different like department. And he did not have the same level of experience that I had working with all of these type of people to know that it's rare to find them together. He was adamant. He was adamant that no, like definitely that has to be just one person. Like two people just makes it too complex. And of course you can find that person. Like that's not that hard. Like blah 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 blah. And so he convinced the boss. He convinced another person in the room. And then all of a sudden, I'm standing there alone, being like, no, like I'm like. And the thing is, I was the expert, right, of this spot. It was a reason I was there. I was the expert in this area. And eventually I just kind of said, okay, well, if you're like very convinced and you're convinced that my solution won't work, I guess, okay, like that's, you're all very convinced otherwise. I have to hop on this bandwagon with you.
What do I know?
I lost 6 months trying to find that person, 6 months of productivity.
Oh my God.
Until eventually, and this is not quite the things, but I'm still like sore about it. That same person came around and said, why don't we just find two people? Why are we like,
stop. Oh my God. This is like we talked about before when you come up with an idea and then nobody listens and then someone else says it. Oh, sickening.
Yep. Luckily, by then another person had joined that team, and because they were in their first couple of weeks when this had started 6 months ago. So now 6 months in, this person is in it more. He actually turned around and said, "Isn't that what Jennifer?"
Is this the one you were saying before in the example? I'm so glad someone did that, because that would drive me insane. I'd rage quit, I would say.
And honestly, like, whilst that was annoying and then satisfactory because that happened, that's kind of irrelevant. What's more relevant is that we lost 6 months. We lost 6 months of proper productivity out of that team because we didn't go with my solution in the first place. And we had interviewed so many people who were strong in one area or the other that I would have hired in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And for some reason, this person was getting a say in my recruitment, and he would veto those people. And that was rough. So yeah, it was an absolute bandwagon effect where, you know, when you have someone that maybe has more influence, more power, like more favor, they can really rally someone to a thing, and then support you kind of get on board with it because you think you might be missing something. And because I did it wasn't just me agreeing to disagree. I was like, well, maybe I am missing something. Maybe you are right.
Yeah, you start to doubt yourself, don't you?
You know,
and it like erodes your confidence.
My expertise and my experience in that, and I agreed. I said, okay, like, you've convinced me, right? Let's do it. But
it's the art of persuasion.
Yeah. So this is, I think, very relevant for leaders to be conscious of the fact that the bandwagon effect can be created in like group situations, can be created very easily, and you have to actively create space for more junior people, or people with less influence, or people who might normally be quieter, to actually give them like credibility and being able to voice their opinion, to do that, right? So that it doesn't.
Because often, a lot of the time, the more junior people are kind of in the thick of things, and have a different perspective on what the needs are, and even just like their advice or just their thoughts on it can help, leaders to make more informed decisions, because they're not into the nitty gritty of the workplace all the time. And like, you were the expert as well. Why are you even there if not to give your expertise on the hiring for a role that you need to help you? Not this other person who has no idea what your day-to-day is like and what skills you're missing on the team.
Yep. I mean, like, it's a good lesson. I mean, it was a rough one because I was getting shit for those 6 months of not being able to hire the person, right? Like, and I was like, but I already told you this person doesn't exist, but okay.
Yeah. And the cost of that too. The invisible cost that no one mentions.
Yeah, and we had a very labor-intensive recruitment process as well. Because we were doing, I mean, it was for a good reason. We were trying to undo a lot of like confirmation bias and stuff, and subconscious bias that we had with various things. So we had a labor-intensive recruitment process, and then I was getting crap. I was like, why haven't you hired this person yet? And it's like, this person doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So,
and that is a symptom of another theory that we're not actually talking about today, the fundamental attribution one, which is where people attribute blame to somebody for something that's not actually their fault. You know, they rely, like, they think you personally are responsible for this, even though it was a different factor that they don't know about or they're not considering. So you were getting crap for this, even though it was as a result of what you were made to do by a more senior person, but it reflects on you that you've been given this task that is unachievable, and you can't achieve it because that person doesn't exist, or, you know, you can't pay a person enough to do that role because they're so in demand. So I love that that whole concept of the fundamental attribution error, because it happens so often, from, you know, getting blamed for a late project because your manager isn't responding to your emails, you know, looks bad on you, but it's actually a factor that your manager hasn't, you know, given you the way to do it properly. So yeah, I love that, and I love noticing that in all. It's so prominent in every aspect of the workplace. But that's a side note to our fallacy conversation. What was the last one? The false dilemma.
Well, yeah, just before we slip over to that one, I think we talked about with the confirmation bias how to counter it.
Yeah,
I think the bandwagon bias is, or the bandwagon effect, or whatever you want to call it. I think you really counter that by trying to shirk off imposter syndrome, like, because the imposter syndrome can really ramp up the bandwagon effect, because you feel like, you know, other people know better. And so, like, one of the big lessons I kind of learned from that was that, no, like, if I'm very sure, like, I'm going to fight for my opinion. Because what I didn't realize at the time, being relatively new to this group, is that, like, it was also my responsibility or accountability to, because it was my call, to say, I hear what you're saying, but it's my call and I'm going to do what I need to do, right? I wasn't sure in being able to do that. And so I think, like, countering the bandwagon effect sometimes is one, examining, yes, go ahead and re-examine all your evidence, because first of all, make sure that you're not a victim of confirmation bias. So you got to re-examine the evidence first of all to make sure of that. And then if you're still sure, like stand up for your opinion. And yeah, if someone who's like has authority over you says, okay, we're going to do this other way though, you can say, okay, like I will agree to disagree. I will do it your way, but like to be clear, like this is my opinion on how this is going to go. And so I think a really like counteracting the bandwagon effect is a confidence in your expertise and your opinion, and like being assertive about stating that without needing to be aggressive, right? You just be assertive about stating your position. Yeah. Not afraid to not go with the crowd.
It's harder for women as well, you know, to do that.
Sure.
You want to come across as aggressive.
Right. And also, this is not even just in the workplace. This is why influencers exist. Like, they're literally taking advantage of the bandwagon effect in a lot of ways. This is how these things kind of prosper and thrive.
If you see your friends doing something or like buying something or like the trend of like different types of sneakers, all that type of stuff, you know.
The Stanley Cup thing, like,
oh my God.
Effect.
Absolute bandwagon effect.
And it's great because once you kind of notice some of these, we'll talk about our third one in a minute, you have to stop yourself a little bit, but sometimes you feel a little bit superior because you're like, oh, I see what's happening.
I know. I would never.
It's like reading like the instructions of the world. You're like, oh, that's why this stuff happens. And then sometimes just knowing about the bias can help you counteract the bias. Right?
Being aware of it and catching yourself if you are falling into any of those traps. Being like, hey.
So yes, false dilemma or a dichotomy, false dichotomy, is the other one we were going to talk about today. Go into it. Right. So it is basically a false dichotomy is like where you've created a decision between 2 points as if those 2 points were the only options available and you don't consider any other option. So, you know, a great example recently we probably would have seen a lot is, are we either going to be back in the office or not? Right. And it's like, okay, there's other options. So, right. It's not either full-time back in the office or full-time remote. There's not just hybrid options. There's like flexibility options. There's options within teams. There's so many different ways that you can actually like talk about this. And the downside of creating false dichotomy in the workplace is that you are immediately eliminating other options that could actually be better. So another one is, say you're noticing like in your company struggling, and you say, well, we either have to like lay off people or the company's going to go bust. And you're like, okay, have you considered getting funding? Have you considered restructuring? Have you considered people going part-time? Have you considered a loan? Have you considered pivoting your like, you know what I mean? There's like multiple opportunities there. And so sometimes people can get really caught up in the like, we have only 2 options here and that's this. And then just completely eliminating all other possibilities before you've even had the chance to talk about them. So that's like creating, like a false dilemma.
So if you had, say, one chocolate bar and another one, you can only have one or the other. You could eat both of them, or you could have half of both.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, basically.
Like, you don't have to limit yourself to one. There's plenty of options.
Yeah.
So,
and I think the false dilemma one, aside from like a really blustery old school male CEO, which I know still exists, right? But like aside from those kind of personalities, the false dilemma one I think is easier to counter because the false dilemma one, for the most part, if you go to someone with enough kind of time and say, hey, like how about this other option? Right. Or you go to say, hey, both of those options seem really bad. How about we look at some other possibilities? And so for the most part, I think it's easier to counter because a lot of people, when they're creating a false dilemma, it's kind of, a lot of it is when you're like choosing between 2 bad things sometimes. And so to actually get an option for a third less bad thing, it's a good exit that people might want to take.
So I think they have to choose the best of 2 bad options.
Yeah. So I think the false dilemma can be easier to counter because you're not dealing as much with like, you're not telling people you have confirmation bias and you're just not looking at the whole picture, right? Which people can get defensive at. it's not the bandwagon effect where a lot of that comes with like power and influence, like imbalance, where people have to risk certain things to like speak up. You're really just kind of saying like, hey, let's explore some other options as well, or let's examine like, why do you think these are the only two options? Let's like get into that and question it and see if does something else emerge. So the false dilemma is one to watch out for in the workplace, because I think it happens a lot, but I think it's much easier to counter. Yeah,
it's
because you're not really
personal.
like challenging people's inherent
exactly
of like accomplishment or competence, right? You're just giving them more things to think about, and
yeah, that's a good one. It's just so interesting that everything we experience in work, there is a name for it nearly, and an explanation for why people act that way or make decisions they make.
Well, I mean, so I've told you before that sometimes when I'm just thinking, I start designing like the perfect company, agnostic to what it actually does, by the way, just in my head, things that would be perfect. And like one of the things about it is I think of what would be like standard like training, like onboarding training to like join a company, and I honestly think that a course on biases and fallacies, how to identify them, how to watch out for them, how to counter them, should be essential reading for everybody everywhere all the time.
No, it's true, because people don't realize they have them, or they do, but they think that they're able to navigate it such that other people won't realize what they're doing. Back to the idea of the corporate psychopath and trying to play people in different ways. But if you do a course where you actually explain all of these different things, and then that person who might more so do those type of things in the workplace might be like, oh, like they're on to me. They actually know, they know all these tricks, and I'm not actually pulling the wool over everybody's eyes. They can try to do it, but everyone else is now aware of the tactics that they use, and so it just gives people a more level playing field, in the workplace.
Yeah, maybe we'll create that course. Who knows?
You know what? It's not out there. That could be in our culture audit or something that we do. Because there's so many people I don't think that realize the meaning behind their actions, and other people might just think, oh, they're just a terrible person, or they're just mean, or something like that. But really understanding how the thought process works and why people behave that way kind of just helps you kind of understand them and the way they work.
Yeah, and I think it helps take the emotion out of things as well, which can be really important for then approaching it to deal with it. So like you talked about, like that kind of false attribution thing, I think as human beings, we naturally assume in a lot of ways, like we do false attribution of like personal feelings onto things that maybe were never there. That can be very detrimental to like a working relationship if you assume somebody's doing something against you personally, even if it's like nothing to do with you. You just happen to be caught in the crossfires of a different kind of mismanagement thing that was just either because of a bias or a lack of information or someone just being lazy, like who knows, right? And so it can help sometimes, take the emotion out of it if you can examine it and say, oh, here's some other options for why you might do this. I'll give you another great example of this actually. So this is now years ago. I was very, very upset at work because I'd noticed that a lot of other leaders, like peer leaders, were having meetings with like the big boss, and I wasn't being invited to anything. And I was like, what? Like, I started to get really upset because I remember like, being like, they think I'm crap, like they are forgetting me, like they don't think I'm important enough to be included, but these are all my peers, and I can't really imagine scenarios that they would be having these big meetings with the boss, and like I'm not, like, and I'm not included. And so I really got in my head about like, they think I'm shit, blah 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 blah, or they just don't like me, or they're deliberately excluding me because whatever. And then someone turned, I was like having a full-on crash out about this, to be clear. And I was having a full-on crash out, and then someone turned around to me, Neil, and he said, have you considered that those people are actually doing something bad, and they're not including you because they actually think you're doing a great job and you don't need to waste your time? And I literally stopped and I was like, I never considered that. Like never. It actually did not cross my mind that I might be being excluded for like a good reason. That's a good reflection on me. And it turned out that was the reason.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because I asked my boss, right? Like, so in the end, I asked my boss. So I wasn't going to just let it fester.
Do you hate me?
About it. But, and it turned out that was exactly the reason. And that also taught me a big lesson to not
automatically assume the worst.
I automatically assume the worst and
Yeah.
like crash out about assigning like personal feelings to stuff. Like it's just unproductive and most of the time incorrect.
No, we're hardwired to think about the negative in case it becomes a problem. So, you know, if you're worried about it, you're trying to figure out solutions. Like if it's a good thing, you're not worried about it. And that's why people always like talk about more negative things on the news and stuff like that. And positive things are not as emphasized. So it works the same way in the workplace, which again, psychology.
Yeah.
We are solving the world's work problems here.
Yeah. Over and over. My perfect company will always just exist in my head.
I know. It doesn't have a product or a location or anything, but the way it operates.
Oh, no. I don't even know if it makes money, but it will be run beautifully.
It will be so good. Everyone will want to work there for free because we don't sell it.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
All the ways the brain will trick us to making bad decisions, or specifically 3 of the ways the brain will trick us.
3 of the 12 ways we're going to talk about at some point. When you initially came up with the like list of the fallacies that we were going to talk about, I didn't realize there were so many. I knew there was a few, but I was surprised that there was so many and that there were names for them. And so I've been finding it interesting myself to read them. But yeah.
And like the edges of them are all blurry because like some of them are kind of similar to some of the other ones. And it's then becomes interesting because like they stack, right? So you might see 3 or 4 of them play the same situation at the same time. It could be hard to unpick, but I think fundamentally like knowledge is power. And so most of these things get halfway resolved by being like really aware of them. And that's why I think they're like just important for people to realize.
Yeah. For sure. That leads us nicely into red flags and our red flags of the week.
What is our red flag for the week? Do you have a red flag for the week?
Well, I was going to ask you, do you have one too? Because we could both do one.
No, I could think of one. I don't have one off the top of my head though. So you go first.
Okay. I have a book full of red flags that I've written down that I can share. One of them might be very trivial, but so if you have a manager or somebody, actually it could be anybody that messages you on Teams and they say like, "Hi, how are you?" and you are like, "Good, thanks, how are you?" and they like do this whole back and forth about how you're doing, and then suddenly it's like, "Can you send me that thing?" It's like, I know what you're up to. Like, why did you even bother with the whole "I care about your weekend" or whatever you did? Like I would be more respectful of you if you just said, "Hi, can you send me that thing?" So like, why are you pretending to be interested in me in order to get something from me? And it's a psychological thing as well. It's like they think that by doing this, it's respectful and not aggressive to pretend you're interested, and then you can ask them for something. But it's so obvious. So that infuriates me. I had a manager that did that all the time. She couldn't care less about my personal life, but you know, I always knew when she wanted something because she was like, "Hey, how are you?" Like, I have never asked me that. You know, you didn't need something. So yeah, that drives me mad. Disgusting.
Yeah, that annoys me. I think for different reasons than you. I don't care if they're pretending to be interested in my life. That's fine. But it's when it's done and it wastes my time.
That's the thing. It is a waste of time.
Yeah, I don't care if they're pretending. I'm like, it's work. It's fine. We can all make small talk. It's when I get. So I would be quite happy to receive a message that all in one message, or at least all at the same time, in a series of messages, says, "Hey, hope you had a good weekend. Do you mind sending me blah, 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 blah." Beautiful.
That's exactly.
Perfect.
That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect.
I don't have an issue with like the small talk or the hope you had a good weekend kind of stuff.
They're wasting your time.
I have an issue where waste my time because then I have other people who will just send a message and say, "Hey, how are you?" And then they don't say anything else.
They don't respond at all.
I respond saying, "Hi."
It's on you then.
How are you? And whereas like in reality, what I want to respond is just tell me what you want. I'm actually happy to chat and I am interested in you and your personal life, but first and foremost, tell me what you want. And then maybe we can chat.
I'm so interested in personal lives. I want to know everything about people's personal lives.
Yeah, I want to find out. And I especially love when other people have drama. I love other people's drama. I love hearing about it. I love hearing about other people. It's great.
Yeah.
So I'm like drama. Yeah. So I'm interested, but like, tell me, do the work thing first. Just say, "Hey, I really need to take this thing. Yeah. Also, I hope you had a great weekend." Blah 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 blah. Beautiful, perfect. But yeah, the whole just like, "Hi," and I'm like, waiting. Am I
Yes.
telling me what it is that you want? Please tell me what you want.
Kind of rude because they're putting the onus on you then to figure out what they want rather than them just telling you. And again, waste of your time.
Yes. I think that's kind of hitting the nail on the head. Is like it shifts the accountability and the responsibility to somebody else. Whereas, and I also found as well, it depends on how busy I am. At the time where I was like, just had way too much work on that I could possibly cope with, when I would get messages like that, I would be unreasonably mad about it. I wouldn't tell them, right? Because it's not their, I'm not going to put it on them. Ironically, I'm not going to put it on them.
Yeah,
but I'd be so unreasonably angry because I'm like, if you want something, let me know now. Because like during the course of me doing everything else, I might just be able to turn it out, or I might have it to hand. But now I have to take extra time to go back, ask you what you want, do the and it's wasted 10 minutes of my time when 10 minutes was incredibly important.
Yeah.
So no, I agree with you on that one.
Teams etiquette, messenger etiquette is a huge thing. We should teach people that too. The perfect way to communicate via Teams when you need something.
This is our second course. So we do a course on biases and fallacies, and we second course on communication norms within or best practice communication best practices within a work organization when using like Teams. Like when to use Teams and Slack, when to use email. If you have Teams and Slack, because here's my red flag, I guess, is when an email could have been a Slack message.
Yeah.
To me, emails are like more cumbersome. Now, obviously, if that's the only way you have of interacting with someone, that's fine, right? It's kind of like a degree of,
you don't have access to a messenger.
Yeah, but if we have Teams or Slack or whatever, and you send me an email asking me like a very simple thing, I am like, what?
No, emails are for really important things. Like things might be important, but there's more meat to an email. Like it has to be something more serious or more information. You can't. It shouldn't be. It can be, but I guess this is just the way we've been conditioned now because we have the messengers and stuff like that. There's like things that are appropriate for a messaging app and things that are more email. It's like millennials using laptops to do important things because I can't book a flight on my phone. I refuse. I have to do it on my laptop.
I am 100% the same. Yeah, no, I do. If it means stuff I have to do, I have to take out my laptop.
There's the avenue for important things, and then there's the avenue for important but like quick things that don't require an email thread.
But also I like to have multiple tabs open. Like when I'm booking a flight, I have multiple tabs open. You know what I mean? Like I'm going through, like I can't do that. I could do that on my phone, but it's not as easy. So I don't like to do that. Because especially like because one of the things that I'd be very conscious of doing in like a full like work day is that I have kind of I've structured my day. Sometimes loosely, sometimes more strictly. It depends. But I would always have something like Teams and Slack open on a screen, like even off the side of a screen, so I kind of can like keep a peripheral eye on stuff coming up. When things urgent, I'm like, oh, okay. Email, I'll be like, I'll check it twice a day. Because if obviously depending on where you get a lot of your information, but most of my stuff in operations is very internally focused, right? So primarily Teams. So external email is not as urgent. External email is not something that I would normally get. So that would be open peripherally, Slack, Teams. And then I'll be like, I'll have slots in my day where I'll be like, okay, now go and check all of your other stuff. Like check your email, blah, 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 blah. And so if someone sends me an email when they could have sent me a Slack or a Teams saying, hey, can you do this thing for me like today? I'm like, no, you're not you sent this request to me in the wrong place. Like, why didn't you just send it to me on Slack? So yeah, to me, it's just like not using the right communication tool for like the right reasons. And also to be clear, that's subjective. I'm not saying that that's how everybody should use it all the time. You have to bear in mind how you communicate within your workplace, and then create a kind of best practice around that. But assuming that's well understood and you step outside of that, it just confuses people and it makes things needlessly complex for people. Yeah. It's kind of like have you ever heard of desire paths?
No.
So desire paths are, and you'll know exactly what I mean when I say it. Do you know when you're like walking down the street and there's like a big area of grass and so like your path might be like going on like on a straight corner, and then you'll notice that there's like a worn track diagonally. So that diagonal path, it's not an official path. It's just enough people have done it. That's called a desire path. So it's basically that regardless of what you set up, humans will mostly try to find like the easiest route to something.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are some kind of countries that take advantage of this, and they'll kind of lay out an area and they'll just let people walk, naturally create desire paths, and then they'll put the official paths on where those desire paths were, which is a great
Oh,
way of like finding spaces.
yeah.
And then there are some people who are like, we're going to try and stop people walking on the grass and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, they're going to do it anyway.
Yeah, they'll find
So,
a way.
yeah. And so like I think a trick within a company in terms of its operations and especially communications is figuring out where the desire paths of communications are and then creating a structure around it such that that's how you should do it. And so if
Mm-hmm.
someone comes in and they start communicating outside of the desire path, it fucks it up for everybody.
I love that idea. And it's funny you say that because they've ripped up the streetcar tracks outside on Bathurst here.
I noticed when I tried to drive there yesterday, but anyway.
Until July. It's March now. July is not very soon. So that's put the kibosh on my getting to work and stuff like that. So I have to get a bus, I have to get a streetcar and a subway. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But they have fenced off so much of the road that for me to get across the road, I if I was following rules, I would have to like go to the next block, cross the road, and walk all the way back down to get to Loblaws. But as you pointed out with the desire path, people have literally lifted up the fences and moved them in order to walk through the construction site.
Good.
And I'm delighted. They actually put those ties. What do they call those plastic ties that they put on things like,
cable ties.
Yeah, they put cable ties on them and people have cut them. And they've just said, no, this is really awkward. And it is like the time it would take to get around just across the road. And the streetcar tracks have been dug up like to within an inch of their lives. They're I don't know what they're doing, but they're replacing them completely. But it was just so funny because I was like, oh, how am I going to get across the road? And then I saw like a whole family like getting through the fence. It's just like nobody cares. They're just gonna, if it's option, they're gonna do it. So I think they made a really bad decision. They're like, oh, people will go around. No, they won't. Not if it's that far. Like surely a little bit of a detour is fine, but like an entire block is nuts.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Good desire paths. That was another one of my little like tool belt things that I'm like, oh hey.
Yeah, I love that because you do see it all the time, but I never even thought there was a name for it. And how that's a good way to frame, if you're putting in a new system or something, let's see how people work first. What's their preferred method of receiving information and where do they go most to get it, where they get the most engagement with it, and then putting the plan in place, so they're able to get it more effectively and efficiently. Love that. Fantastic. That ends our little conversation very well.
Yeah.
I have no updates on Lively and Baldoni at the moment because I haven't listened to all my podcasts, but next time I will have more information on it and where the case is currently.
My entire extra time has been taken up with trying to do analysis of everything. So the tariffs from Canada, the situation in Europe with Russia and Ukraine, and I have like a 100-page document of deep research from ChatGPT on the geopolitical stability in various scenarios. I'll share it with you someday. It's a great read. But that's what I've been doing.
The geopolitical stability of the world on your shoulders.
Yep. It's fine. Everything's going to be fine.
Yeah. It will. It'll be great.
Probably be fine. The most likely the scenarios means it's probably be fine. But the worst case scenario is World War III. But it's probably not going to happen.
The worst case scenario is it won't be fine.
Yeah, the worst case scenario is genuinely World War III. But the most likely scenario is things are going to be tense for a while, but it'll be okay. Probably a recession. So not everybody will be okay, but like compared to World War III, it'll be okay.
Yeah, that will be worst case scenario, definitely. Yeah.
It is. I'll send it to you.
Great. I look forward to reading it. I'll read it on the plane tonight.
Wait, plane? Where are you going?
Oh, I'll tell you, I'm going to New York again this weekend.
Oh my God, what a terrible time to go to the States, but okay.
You what?
What a terrible time to go to the States, but okay.
Yeah, I know.
You managed to go back because the last time it all got cancelled and everything?
Yeah, so my brother just got different flights and it'll probably be the last time I'll be able to go before they have their baby. So gonna fly out tonight, back on Sunday. So that will be interesting. We're going to go to, I want to go to Sleepy Hollow. That's near them. And I want to go there just because it's all spooky and stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So I will read your geopolitical observations if you send them to me.
Yeah. I think I literally got to the point where it was so long, and now I'm actually going to take that and put that document back through
I
into
get it to reduce it.
and ask it to do like a summary. Yeah.
Do that before you send it to me, would you?
I will do that.
If you could put some pictures in it too, that'd be great.
I can't do that. Sorry.
All right.
Although,
well,
like, I'll just like pick random pictures that are irrelevant to what's happening. I'm just like, here's a picture of a cat. Take a deep breath. Now read the next bit.
yeah. Support pictures to get me through it all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, look, have a little break.
Puppies. War.
Oh my god.
No. Oh Lord. Anyway,
Yeah.
okay.
You'll
Well,
be glad to know that the TLDR is Canada and Ireland are some of the safest places from a geopolitical stability point of view. And
yay.
so either place is a good place to be. And it's especially good to have dual citizenship in both places, as we both do, in case you need to go to one or the other for any reason.
Yeah. Fantastic. Good for us.
Yeah. Good for us. Yeah, we're great.
Woohoo. Well, thanks for listening again.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll be back with more fallacies and more
fallacies. We will be back with more fallacies. We'll probably do.
We'll never stop talking about them. Okay. Bye.